Today you're going to learn what is intonation, what is the difference between stress and intonation, why is intonation important, and then you're going to learn about the rules of intonation and practice your English intonation with me. Now it's time to start learning about intonation. Let's start with the first question. What is intonation? Intonation in English refers to the rise and fall of your voice while you're speaking. You use intonation to convey emotion and meaning. Intonation plays a crucial role in the expression of questions, statements, emotions, and it can even change the meaning of words and sentences. For example, look at this sentence. You're leaving. You can completely change the meaning of this sentence by changing the intonation. With a rising intonation at the end, it sounds like you're maybe a bit surprised, or you're just checking if the person's actually leaving. For example, oh, you're leaving? With a falling intonation at the end, it sounds more like a statement. For example, maybe you already know the person's leaving and you're just acknowledging it. Oh, you're leaving. As you can see, intonation completely changes the interpretation of a sentence, making it super important for you to learn. What is the difference between stress and intonation? I've included this question because a lot of people think that stress and intonation are the same thing and they're almost interchangeable terms, but stress and intonation are not the same thing. However, they are kind of like sisters. What I mean by that is you'll often find them go together. So they're not the same thing, but usually they accompany each other. Stress refers to the emphasis that you place on a word or in a part of a sentence. For example, if I say really with a falling intonation at the end, you can still hear that the stress is on the first syllable. While if I say really, now you can hear that the intonation goes up at the end, but the stress is still on the first syllable. Now, when you change the intonation, notice that the meaning also changes. Really, with a falling intonation, sounds more like a statement, while really sounds like I'm either asking a question or I'm surprised. Why is learning about intonation in words important? Intonation helps to give meaning and emotion to what you're saying. It's so important for clarifying meanings, expressing your feelings and emotions, as well as managing the flow of a conversation. Learning about intonation in English will not only help you to convey your emotions and feelings and thoughts, but it will also help you to understand other people's intentions behind what they're saying. In other words, you can study all the vocabulary and grammar in the world, but if you don't understand how intonation works in English, it can lead to communication problems. Now let's look at intonation in words and how to use intonation in words. When it comes to words with just one syllable in English, your intonation will either slide down or slide up when you're speaking. For example, yes and yes. Freya has come to say hi. Hi, baby. She has a little infection in her eye, so she's a little bit gunky today. Hi, baby. Say hi. Little cutie. Leave the tea. Leave the tea alone. Leave the tea alone. Yes sounds like you're asking a question, or you're perhaps unsure about something. It could also indicate that you're about to add extra and further information. For example, have you finished writing your essay yet? Yes, well, I just need to finish writing the conclusion, but it should only take me about 10 minutes. When you have a word in English with 2 or more syllables, your intonation will jump. For example, never and never. Notice I'm not saying never. It's not sliding, it's never, never. There's a jump between those 2 syllables. Have you ever been to Madrid? No, never. Never? Intonation in sentences. When you stress words in sentences in English, you'll notice that your intonation rises on those important stressed words. For example, I need to study. I need to study. Notice that the words I and t are very weak here and your tone is very low. However, notice that your intonation on the important words need and study goes up. With need, because it's just one syllable, your intonation starts high and then it slides down. need. With study, your intonation goes high on that first syllable because it's stressed, and then it jumps down when you say the second syllable because this is weaker, and also it's the end of the sentence. Study. Intonation in normal speech. Typically, in normal speech, you will find a falling intonation at the end of the sentence. This indicates that you've finished what you're saying. For example, he arrived at noon. You finished your sentence, so your intonation falls on noon. When you've finished your sentence, you typically end with a falling intonation, which is why noon ends with a falling intonation. However, if you want to show that you haven't finished speaking yet, you can use a rising intonation. For example, when I opened the door, I got the fright of my life. When I opened the door, I got the fright of my life. So if I ended the sentence on when I opened the door, the other person would be sitting in suspense thinking, and finish the sentence because I ended with a rising intonation. So to show to the other person, look, I've finished speaking now, you can end with a falling intonation. Giving old and new information. You can use intonation to indicate what is new and old information for your listener. When you think the information is new for your listener, the intonation at the end of your sentence goes down. If you think your listener already knows something, or if something's quite obvious, then your intonation will rise at the end of what you're saying. You can also use rising intonation with information that's a bit redundant. In other words, it may be something that you've repeated from a person's question or something repeated that someone said earlier. For example, what time did Lisa leave? I heard her leave at about 5 o'clock. I heard her leave is redundant information because the first person said, what time did Lisa leave? We're basically repeating a bit of the question. It's redundant, it's shared knowledge, it's shared information, so your intonation rises. However, the new information is at 5 o'clock. This is new, therefore the intonation goes down at the end. Alternatively, you can flip this sentence around and the intonation will still stay the same way because it doesn't matter where these phrases are, all it matters is what information is there. So you could say, for example, at about 5 o'clock I heard her come in. It sounds weird, sounds a bit like Yoda speech, but it's possible because we don't really care where these phrases are in the sentence. All we care about is whether it's new or old information. Questions. Genuine and checking for information. If you believe that you must use a rising intonation at the end of every question, then you are wrong. Questions in English are usually clear from their grammatical structure. For example, I could say, you have eaten, and we know that this is a statement. However, have you eaten is more of a question. We know that because of the grammatical structure. This means that intonation in questions in English can be very flexible. You can use different intonation in questions to show different meanings or different types of questions. If you want to ask a question and you don't know the answer, so it's a genuine question, then your intonation usually falls at the end. For example, when's your birthday? I'm asking you with a falling intonation because I genuinely don't know when your birthday is. However, if you want to check or clarify something, so maybe you already know the answer and you're not 100% sure, or you just want some clarification, then your intonation usually rises at the end. So let's stick with the same question we had before. Imagine I say, when's your birthday? And I use a rising intonation at the end. This sounds more like, you've told me your birthday before, but I don't remember when it is exactly, I've forgotten. You can also use a falling intonation at the end of questions when you want someone to agree with something that you've said. For example, isn't it cold today? I'm not genuinely asking if it's cold or not. I'm making a bit of a statement, but in the form of a question, because I want you to agree with me. I'm trying to create a bit of a conversation with you. You can also use rising intonation in questions when you want to express criticism. For example, are you crazy? Or you can use it for surprise. How much are these? Be careful when using intonation like this, because there is a huge difference between how much are these and how much are these? The first one sounds like you're asking a genuine question because we're using a falling intonation, like, when's your birthday? How much are these? It's a real genuine question that you want to know the answer to, so your intonation falls. The second one, how much are these? Sounds like you're really shocked or surprised, like you can't believe the price of something. So it can come across as quite rude or offensive, so be really careful. Sometimes when you ask a question, you may have an idea what the answer is, so you may want to add that after your question. If you want to do this, then you add a fall, rising tone to that little question with that suggestion at the end. For example, what time does the show start? At 2 o'clock? At 2 o'clock. I'll give you another example. Where have you been all day? At work. At work. And you notice that the intonation goes really down and then really back up again. This is the fall rising intonation. Intonation in question tags. A question tag, or tag question, you can use either one, is a short phrase that we add to the end of a statement to turn it into a question. For example, you're coming to the party, aren't you? You can use question tags for checking information, seeking agreement, giving opinions, being a bit critical and sarcastic, and for even emphasizing things. So you can use it to emphasize something that was said earlier. Let's talk about the intonation in tag questions when checking information. The intonation in the first part will fall, but the intonation in the second part, the little question tag, will go up. For example, the film starts at 12, doesn't it? Here, we think that the film starts at 12, but we're not 100% sure, so we're just checking. Now, if you want to say something and you're not checking for information and you believe that it's true, you know that it's true, then your intonation will fall and fall on the tag question as well. For example, it's so hot today, isn't it? Like, we know it's hot, it's like 45 degrees outside, so yeah, you can't deny it, yeah? Right now, luckily it's not 45 degrees, but you are so annoying, aren't you? She's not annoying, she's lovely. Now let's look at seeking agreement and giving opinions. If you're sharing a belief or an opinion and you want your listener to agree with you, then you can use falling intonation. For instance, the film was great, wasn't it? My intonation goes down on the question tag because I'm not actually asking for clarification or confirmation or anything. I'm basically sharing my opinion and I want you to agree with my opinion. Now, if you want to sound more sarcastic, you can use a falling intonation. We usually start these sarcastic phrases with oh, so, and sometimes well. For example, so, you think you're stronger than me, do you? Oh, you think you're smarter than me, do you? Here, I'm not asking an actual question. I'm not being genuine. I'm being a bit sarcastic. Notice as well that I'm using a positive phrase with a positive question tag. When you were first taught about question tags, your teacher may have explained to you that you must use a positive and a negative together. So your question tag should be negative and your statement before that should be positive. So it's always positive, negative, or negative positive. However, look at what happens when you use positive positive. It can give the impression of sarcasm or it can be used for surprise. Here's another example. Eating all that cake to yourself, are you? Notice how using positive positive actually sounds quite sarcastic and quite critical, like, oh, you're actually eating all that cake to yourself, are you? Again, I'm not asking a real genuine question. I'm being a bit critical, quite judgmental of the other person for eating the whole cake, which I never would, because I am that person that eats the whole cake. Sticking with the theme of sounding a little bit mean and adding some attitude to your intonation, if you want someone to admit something that they didn't previously want to admit or something that they previously didn't believe, then you can use a falling intonation. For example, I told you not to touch that flame, didn't I? So maybe the person before said, I'm going to touch the flame, I'm going to touch the flame. And you said, you know, if you touch that flame, you're going to hurt yourself. Then they touch the flame and you can turn around and say, I told you not to touch the flame, didn't I? Yeah, falling. Finally, if you want to emphasize something that you said before, you can use a falling intonation to do this. For example, that was a stupid thing to do, wasn't it? Falling, falling. So you could just say, that was a stupid thing to do. But to really emphasize it, you can add that question tag at the end, because it kind of makes the other person think like, oh yeah, it was a stupid thing to do. And if you want to do that, use a falling, falling intonation. It's a stupid thing to do, wasn't it? Now let's look at the intonation in questions when you want to give your listener options. When you want to give two possible options to your listener, your intonation will go up on the first option and then down on the second option. For example, do you prefer tea or coffee? Tea or coffee? Here's another one. Do you want to leave now or later? Now or later. So if you have more options, like for example, you may want to say tea, coffee or juice, it will just keep going up until you get to the final option. And then the final option will have a falling intonation. Do you prefer tea, juice or coffee? So it doesn't matter how many options you have. You just keep listing them with a rising intonation, and then the final one will have a falling intonation to indicate that it's the end of all the possible options. And finally, intonation in lists. This rule is quite similar to the one that we've just looked at. So when you're giving a list in English and you're reading it aloud, all of the things on the list will have a rising intonation to show that the list is continuing, but then the final item on that list will have a falling intonation, and that falling intonation will indicate, okay, that's the end of the list. For example, so I need to buy some eggs, milk, bread, and butter. So when reading a list, if you keep using a rising intonation and you say something like, so I need to buy some eggs, milk, bread, and you just stop, then your listener will be like, and, because they're waiting for you to complete that list with a falling intonation. And that's the end of your master. So let's focus on the first one here. So we've got this text, right? And as you can see, there are parts which are in capital letters, and this shows where our stress goes, okay? This is how the book represents stress. So you've got, you'll arrive, for example, okay? You'll arrive, the stress goes on, arrive. Then you've got these little arrows. These arrows indicate where our intonation goes. Does it rise or does it fall? Okay, then you've got these little lines, these kind of dashes, and these basically show the end of a speech unit. So you've got speech units, which I've not talked yet about on my channel, but I will do in the future. You've got these little speech units. They're like sections of speech before you have a little pause. So every time you get these two little lines, it's basically a very short pause. So I'm going to read through this. Actually, you know what? Let me just zoom in slightly. Oh, you know what? My editor could do it. Editor, sneaky, can you like zoom in, please? What I'm going to do is read through it, and then you can listen. And then what I'd like you to do is just listen and repeat. After that, I'd also like you to think, why do you think the intonation is changing? What's the rule? Can you notice something? Okay, so let's read through it first. You'll arrive at Central Station. When you get off the train, turn left along the platform. At the end of the platform, there's an escalator. Go up it, and you'll be in the main square. There's a fountain in the square, and I'll be waiting for you there. So I'm going to read it once more, but I'm going to pause after each speech unit, and I'd like you to listen and repeat, okay? Let's go. You'll arrive at Central Station. When you get off the train, turn left along the platform. At the end of the platform, there's an escalator. Watch out for that word. Escalator, not escu or esca, but escalator. Go up it, and you'll be in the main square. There's a fountain, not fountain, yeah, fountain, in the square, And I'll be waiting for you there. So if you're still struggling with the tones, don't worry, we're going to sort that out in a moment. We're going to fix that because I know my private students struggle with the tones quite a lot. We're going to fix it, don't worry. Firstly though, notice the rule. Any idea what the rule is? Well, if we scroll down a little bit, if I scroll down a little bit here, we can see that if we use a falling tone when we're speaking, especially when we're giving information, I should say, it tends to be when we're adding news. So our intonation goes down when we're saying something new. If, however, our intonation goes up, it rises, then it indicates that we're sharing something old, that it's not news, that it's not new to the listener. So if it falls, it's new information, and if it rises, then it is old information. So let's just have another little practice, because I know that, especially when I do these lessons with intonation with my private students, they struggle a little bit with the tones. So what I want you to imagine is every time we get an arrow that goes up, imagine you're kind of asking a question. So it's like, you'll arrive when you get off the train, go up it, in the square, okay, and it goes up like this, like you're asking a question. All the others, where the intonation goes down, you're just going to say it with that falling intonation. It's just going to fall. So, at Central Station, turn left along the platform. There's an escalator. It goes down, like this, okay? Let's have a practice. So again, I will say each speech unit, I will pause for a moment. If you need more time, pause the video, rewind, do whatever you need to do to practice. But listen and repeat. You'll arrive. Imagine you're asking that question. You'll arrive at Central Station. At Central Station. When you get off the train. When you get off the train. Turn left along the platform. Turn left along the platform. At the end of the platform. At the end of the platform. There's an escalator. There's an escalator. Go up it. Go up it. And you'll be in the main square. And you'll be in the main square. There's a fountain. There's a fountain. In the square. In the square. And I'll be waiting for you there. And I'll be waiting for you there. So, now we've gone through that, we understand the rules and everything. Let's take a look at this part here. So, this is taking the text, but just shortening it down to a shorter example, basically. So, we've got here, see you on Saturday. B says, but I'll be in London at the weekend. More naturally, but I'll be in London at the weekend. But I'll be in London at the weekend. You see how it goes down on London and then up again at the weekend? So with London, we know that London is new information. That's why our intonation is falling. The weekend goes up because A, already mentioned Saturday. We know that we're talking about the weekend. This is not new information for the listener. So you can see here we've got exercise 1. This is actually a listening exercise. We're not going to do this one together in this video. We're actually going to jump down to this one here and we're going to do this one together. So what we're going to do is read through each of them. We're going to do them together. You can pause the video at any moment if you want more time or if you want to do them yourself and then play more of the video and check your answers later and do it together with me. But what we're going to do is read through each of these and I'd like you to decide whether you think in each of the speech units the intonation rises or it falls. So as you can see in the example, and this book is great because it always gives examples when it gives the activities. You've got the example, where on earth did you find that? Where on earth did you find that? I came across it in an antique shop. So, in an antique shop gives us new information. So the intonation is going to fall here. I came across it is basically repeating, I found it. And the person asked, where on earth did you find that? And they're saying, I found it. I came across it. So the intonation goes up to show that this is not new intonation. It's not new information, I should say. The new information is in the antique shop. So take a look at the other ones. What you can do is pause the video now, have a go at doing these, and then you can check back, or we can do them together. If you want to do them together, then let's go and do it now. So the first one, what time shall we leave? We could go now, as you're ready. We could go now, as you're ready. So we could go now is basically answering the question. It's giving us that new information. And remember, new information falls and old information rises, okay? So we could go now, as you're ready. We could go now, as you're ready. Number 2, what time did David get back? Again, have a think. What's important here? What's new here? What's new information? New information always falls. So I heard him come in at about 3. I heard him come in. What time did he get back? He got back. You're basically repeating the question, aren't you, at that point? I heard him come in at about 3. I'm not sure his plan would work very well. I thought his suggestion was ridiculous. I thought his suggestion was ridiculous. So our intonation is going to fall on was ridiculous, because here we're answering the question, or we're not really answering a question here, we're kind of giving some new information by saying, I thought his suggestion. We're not really saying anything. We're just saying, I thought his suggestion. Thought his suggestion was what? You know, we're not saying anything new, but was ridiculous. We're giving some new information. So, I thought his suggestion was ridiculous. Number 4. The hall was packed, wasn't it? Tag question there, careful. The hall was packed, wasn't it? Wasn't it? I hate it when it's so crowded. I hate it when it's so crowded. So I hate it is going to go down when it's so crowded. Crowded, we've already mentioned that it was packed, okay? Packed is the same as crowded, it's busy, there are loads and loads of people there. So the crowded part is redundant, it's repeated, not new information. I hate it is new information. Number 5, I wouldn't mind some orange juice if you've got any. I wouldn't mind some orange juice if you've got any. So, I wouldn't mind some orange juice is the part that's answering. If you've got any. It's just a little polite thing in there. It's not adding new or old information here, really. It's just redundant. So if it's redundant and it's not important and it's not adding any new information, right. And then the last one, I could move that easily. Well, why don't you try if you think you're so strong? Well, why don't you try if you think you're so strong? So the same as what's happened with the other sentences, if you think you're so strong, here is not new information because the other person just said, I could move that easily. So they already think that they're quite strong. So here it's old information, therefore it rises. The new information here is, why don't you try? Yeah, it's gonna fall because it's new information. And that's it for this lesson. I hope you've enjoyed it and you've learned. So in general, the way that people talk about intonation in questions is quite simple. If you have a closed question and if you have an open question, the intonation changes. So let's start with a closed question first. What does that mean? A closed question is basically when you can answer with yes or no. So if I say something like, are you from Spain? Are you from Spain? Then this you can answer with yes or no. In general, with these kind of questions, as you may have noticed then, we rise that intonation at the end. Are you from Spain? Are you from Spain? Another example is, do you like chocolate? Do you like chocolate? Do you like chocolate? You hear? It goes up at the end. Now, contrary to this, if you have an open question, meaning that you can answer with anything besides yes and no, so it requires maybe a longer answer or a different answer, essentially to yes or no.
our intonation changes. It actually goes down. Now, this might be really weird for some people because intonation in your language when you're asking questions may always rise. However, in English, it can rise or fall, like I'm going to show you now. An example of this is, where did he go? Where did he go? Where did he go? You see, it drops on the go. Where did he go? I cannot answer with yes or no. Where did he go? Yes. It doesn't work. So this one, our intonation has to fall because it is an open question. It's not closed, meaning I can only have a yes or no answer. Another example is, who's that? Who's that? Who's that? It could be anyone. I cannot say, who's that? No. Okay, it's not a closed question, it is an open question, it requires a different answer to yes and no, therefore our intonation drops. So to sum that part up, if your question is a closed question, meaning you answer with yes or no, that means your intonation rises. If your answer is something other than yes or no, and it is an open question, then your intonation is going to fall. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is something that quite a lot of books and teachers and videos and things miss out. No shade towards them, that's fine, but we're going to talk about that now. Let's take the sentence, when's your birthday? When's your birthday? Now, I said earlier that because this is an open question, I cannot answer with yes or no, it means that the intonation is going to drop. When's your birthday? When's your birthday? That's fine. However, if I add a rising intonation and I say, when's your birthday? When's your birthday? The meaning completely changes. So if I use a falling intonation here and I say, when's your birthday? It means that it is a genuine question. I'm trying to find the answer to this question. I do not know the answer. However, if I use a rising intonation and I say, when's your birthday? When's your birthday? It means that I've forgotten. I'm making sure. I'm checking something. So maybe you told me you told me when your birthday was in the past, and I just don't remember. When's your birthday? I don't remember when you told me it was. Sorry. You see, the intonation goes up. Another example is, what's your name? What's your name? So the intonation goes down. What's your name? Because it's a genuine question. I'm trying to find out the answer. I've never met you. I don't know you. What's your name? Intonation drops. However, imagine I've known you for, I don't know, a day, but I've just forgotten your name. So my intonation would rise because I'm just checking. What's your name? What's your name? What's your name? So with this rule, we could say that our intonation drops with these kinds of questions when we genuinely want to find out the answer we don't know. And our intonation rises when we do know the answer, but we're just checking, or we're clarifying, or we're making sure that the answer that we have is correct, or maybe we've forgotten and we're just checking. Now, another type of question which confuses a lot of students is our choice questions. So this is when you offer or Now, what happens with this one is that I rise my intonation on the first option and then my intonation drops on the second option. For example, do you prefer tea or coffee? Do you prefer tea or coffee? Tea or coffee? You see, on tea it rises, coffee it drops again. Another example is, do you prefer Spain or France? Do you prefer Spain or France? Rises on Spain, falls on France. It also works the same if I cut the rest of the question and I just have the two options. Tea or coffee? Tea or coffee? Works the same way. So that's pretty much everything you need to know for now about question intonation.
Now, before we start talking about the 8 rules for word stress, we're going to start with some absolute basics that you need to know. And that is, what is a syllable? So a syllable is essentially the units of a word. They're the sections of the word. They're where we break the word up. For example, the word go has just 1 syllable. However, happy has 2 syllables. Excited, 3 syllables. Reality, 4 syllables. Understandable, 5 syllables. Accessibility, 6 syllables. So you see, We can add more and more syllables the longer the word gets. However, don't think that the more letters you add, the more syllables there are. For example, we have one syllable. At, one syllable, but 2 letters. Sit, one syllable, 3 letters. Fool, one syllable, 4 letters. Tooth, one syllable, 5 letters. You see where I'm going with this? Bought, 6 letters. Brought, 7 letters. So don't think that the more letters a word has, the more syllables it has. Okay, it's not always the case. So now we know what syllables are. Let's start looking at our first rule. Take a look at these words. Table, ticket, pencil, record. What do all these have in common? They are 2-syllable nouns. And where does the stress go? On the first syllable. So notice when we stress syllables, we're adding more emphasis. We're pronouncing it more strongly. So pencil, table, ticket, record. So let's take ticket for an example. It's a perfect one here. We have the same vowel sounds in both syllables, but I'm not saying ticket. It's not strong. That first one is stronger. Ticket, ticket. Rule number 2. Take a look at these words. Happy, angry, busy, easy. What do all these have in common again? They're not nouns, they're adjectives. 2-syllable adjectives. And just like our first rule, the stress goes on the first syllable. So again, make sure you're pronouncing those stronger syllables with more emphasis. Rule number 3. Take a look at these words and think about what they have in common this time. Record, provide, allow, become. They are all verbs. They are all 2-syllable verbs. And where does the stress go? On the second syllable. So when you have 2-syllable nouns and adjectives, the stress tends to go on the first syllable. However, if it's a 2-syllable verb, the stress tends to go on the second syllable. So this means if you get words that are spelled exactly the same, but they perhaps have a noun and a verb form, we change the stress, we change the pronunciation. For example, record, record. This is the noun. Record, record. This is the verb. Record, record. You hear how the stress changes. So in some sentences, I bought a record. I bought a record. I'll record it later. I'll record it later. Here are just a few other examples, but there are plenty of other pairs like this that go together. Produce, produce. Produce, produce. Rebel, rebel. Rebel, rebel. Conflict, conflict. Conflict, conflict. So notice how that stress changes depending on the word form, if it's a noun or if it's a verb. Rule number 4. If we have a word ending in IC, so ick, the stress goes on the penultimate syllable. So if the word ends with ick, the syllable before that will be the stressed syllable. For example, static, static. Barbaric, barbaric. Enthusiastic, enthusiastic. Rule number 5. Words ending in SION or TION follow the same rule that we've just talked about. So the stress doesn't go on that TION or SION ending, it goes before it. So the syllable that's before it, we put the stress there. For example, nation, nation. solution, solution. So again, it doesn't matter how long the word is. Obligation. The stress still goes on that syllable before it, that penultimate syllable. Obligation. Station. So of course, if it's just 2 syllables, it's going to go on that first one because it's the syllable before the T-I-O-N. Station. Rule number 6. If we have words that end with, and I need to look at my list, CY, TY, PHY, so FI, GY, or SY, the stress goes on the antepenultimate syllable. What does that mean? So it doesn't go on the last, it doesn't go on the one before that, it goes on the one before that. Okay, so we're going to focus on the third one from the end. For example, democracy. So notice that there's the stress syllable and then there's the 2 after. Democracy. Hypocrisy. Now a nice long one here. Cinematography. Cinematography. So again, it doesn't matter how many syllables are before it. It has one of those endings, so it follows this rule. Rule number 7. If the word ends with ul, so A-L, it follows the same rule that we just talked about. It goes on the antepenultimate syllable. So not on the ul, not on the syllable before it, but on the syllable before that. For example, critical, critical, magical, magical, historical, historical. A longer one. Economical, economical. So again, doesn't matter what's before it, the stress still goes on the antepenultimate syllable. Economical. Finally, rule number 8. This is probably the trickiest rule to get your head around. It's why I've saved it for last, for the most dedicated students who stuck around to the end. We're going to talk about sentence stress and how that affects a word's stress. So English is a stress-timed language. What does that mean? What is a stress-timed language? It essentially means that we have 2 types of words. Our important words that we emphasize more, and then little words in between that are there for grammatical purposes. They're not that important, and they are weakened. So if you listen to English, it sounds something like blah, 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 blah. And these wah words that are standing out tend to be clearer and you understand them more easily. Let's compare it to a syllable time language to make it a little bit clearer what I'm talking about here. So a syllable time language essentially puts stress and even timing on every single syllable. So if you listen to a language, for example, like Spanish, you will hear it being pronounced as something like da 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 da. And I remember many years ago, a tutor of mine at university telling me that syllable time languages sound kind of like machine guns, like do 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 do. They're very even are all of the syllables. Well, if you listen to a language like English, it's not like that. If I were to pronounce it like that, it would sound like this and everything would be stressed and it would sound very, very robotic. So how do you know which words are stressed? We can categorize words in English into 2 different groups. Content words, which are stressed. They always carry the meaning, the important parts of the sentence, the content. And then we have the structure words, the little grammatical words that are not so important and they don't hold that much meaning. All of the content words would be stressed in a sentence. The function or structure words, whatever you want to call them, these in sentences tend to be weaker. So your content words are nouns, adverbs, adjectives, verbs, question words like who, what, when, etc. at the start of a question, negative auxiliary and modal verbs, as well as negative words like no and not, etc. Your function and structure words, whatever you want to call them, tend to be your articles, auxiliary verbs, modal verbs, the verb to be, pronouns, prepositions, and conjunctions, otherwise known as connectives. These words tend to have, if you look in the dictionary, a strong and a weak form. In sentences, when we're speaking naturally, we tend to use the weak form. I'll give you an example. I wanted to see the film. Notice that rhythm. I wanted to see the film. You see what I was talking about earlier? Ba 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 ba. You see, those words that are stressed, the intonation goes up and they're a lot clearer. While if we look at the words in between, those little function words, you can see that they're very, very weak. I don't say to see the film. No. To see the. They become much weaker. So these sorts of words, they tend to be pronounced with schwa sounds, like not always, depends on the word. But what you'll see is it goes from to ta, the to the. They're a lot softer and a lot weaker. Here's another example. Can you help me with my homework? Can you help me with my homework? So notice that help and homework are both stressed. Everything else is a lot weaker and a lot softer. So we pronounce those content words a lot stronger, while the other words, those structure words, they tend to get pronounced a little bit weaker. If you want some more practice on this and some more information, some more examples, I do have a video fully dedicated to this. I will leave it down in the description. Go and check it out. It's one of my most popular videos. So I'm sure you will enjoy it and benefit from it. And that is the end of this lesson. Let's start firstly with what kind of stress English uses. English is a stress-timed language, and this basically means that you give certain words, which we'll talk about in a moment, more stress and more emphasis. When other words are weakened, they sound a lot softer. This is why when you're watching something with subtitles, for example, you understand everything, and then you turn off the subtitles and you think, what was that word? That sounded like a really long word. But actually, when you put the subtitles back on and you take a look, it actually turns out to be these little words all squished together and said very quickly. And that's because of sentence stress. We can compare a stress time language to, for example, a syllable time language. A syllable time language basically gives each syllable approximately the same amount of time. We can also compare it to more time languages. For example, Japanese. So if you're a Japanese speaker, congrats, you speak a more time language. This is very similar in a sense to syllable time languages, where you give each mora the same amount of time. I still remember when I was at university, a lecturer of mine described mora timing and syllable time languages like machine guns. It's like da 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 da. While English is more like ba 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 ba. And that's because we give certain words more stress in a language like English. So let me give you an example of what I mean. Let's take this exercise here. Very simple one, okay? I hope you can count to 4, because that's all you need to do right now. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? That's the rhythm we're going to follow. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's try adding some words in between. For example, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now notice what I did. I didn't say 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. I didn't stress and. I only stressed the numbers. And was weakened to n. So not and, but n. We're using a weak form here. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Let's add another word in there. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4. Again, I'm not saying 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4, okay? That's quite tiring and my poor hand is gonna start hurting in a moment. But you see what I mean. So in English, we don't stress every single word. We're going to stress the numbers because they're important here in this exercise, but the and a are going to be weakened to n, We're going to join them together, n. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4. Now let's apply this same rule to a proper sentence. So here I've got, I want a cup of tea. I want a cup of tea. So notice I'm not saying, I want a cup of tea. It's not all stressed. I want a cup of tea. Now when it comes to intonation, we're going to raise our pitch slightly on those stressed words. So we're not going to read it all monotone, like, I want a cup of tea, okay? Sounds very robotic in English if you do that. You'll be understood, but to another person's ear, it will sound quite robotic. So raise your pitch on those stressed words. I want a cup of tea. I want a cup of tea. Now you're probably thinking, great Emma, understood that, but which words are stressed and which ones are unstressed? I have a handy table for you. What we can do is categorize English words into two different groups, our content words and function words. To name a few content words, nouns, adverbs, adjectives, verbs, question words, and negative, auxiliary, modal, and negative words in general. For our function words, we have articles, auxiliary verbs, modal verbs, the verb to be, pronouns, prepositions, and conjunctions, otherwise known as connectives. So if we go back to our original sentence, I want a cup of tea, we have I as a pronoun, want, verb, a, article, cup, noun, of, preposition, tea, noun. So you can see here how it follows that list that I gave before. Now let's change our sentence a little bit. I would like a cup of tea. This time we've got the pronoun, well it's the same as before, pronoun. Then we've got would, we've got a modal verb. But notice I'm not saying I would like, I weaken it. I would like. So would becomes would. I would like is a verb. I would like a. It's the same after that actually, it's the first sentence. So we have the article a, cup, noun, of, preposition, and tea, the noun. Let's take a look at this one together. Which of these words do you think will be stressed? Okay, you can pause, have a think. She will be late to the party. She will be late to the party. So again, she, pronoun, will is our modal verb, and we don't usually stress modal verbs. She will be late. Late is an adjective. To the, not to the, to the. Preposition, article, party, noun. She will be late to the party. She will be late to the party. Here's another sentence, a little bit longer to practice with. Which ones do you think will be stressed here? Feel free to pause the video and take your time. Can you go to the shop and buy me some bread? Can you go to the shop and buy me some bread? Can, remember, is a modal verb. We're not going to stress it. Can becomes can. Can you go? Can you go, not to the shop? Can you go to the shop and buy me some bread? Some, strong form is some, gets weakened to a schwa. Can you go to the shop and buy me some bread? Can you go to the shop and buy me some bread? Now we sometimes break this rule if the word is used for emphasis, contrast, if it's alone in a sentence, or sometimes if it comes at the end of a sentence. So let's take this sentence here. Now in normal sentence stress, we could say, I asked her if she wanted fish and chips. I asked her, or asked, it's up to you, or asked. I asked her if she wanted fish and chips. Fish and chips. So not fish and chips. Fish and chips. Okay? And gets weakened to un. But let's imagine the listener that we're speaking to got a bit confused. They thought we said something else, so we need to clarify something. No, I said fish and chips, not fish or chips. Fish and chips, not fish or chips. Now I'm giving stress to and or. Otherwise, naturally, it would be said as fish and chips and fisher chips. Fish and chips, that sounds really weird. But it's what we would say. Now for some extra practice and to talk about... Now, there are different types of sentence stress depending on the language. Here I've got 3 different ones: syllable timed, stress timed, and mora timed. I'm very interested to know, whether you know this already, what timed language is English? Is English a syllable, a stress, or a mora timed language? What do you think? What do you think? Ooh, there are arguments breaking out in the chat. Yeah, don't start arguments in the chat. Uruguay Spanish sounds sexy. Yeah, it's a country. It's a country in South America. Yeah. It's very famous for its beef, apparently. Yeah, we've got mora timing, stress timing, and syllable timing. Which one do you think English is? So do you think English is a syllable-timed language? Is English a stress-timed language? Or is English a mora-timed language? We've got stress-timed, mostly stress-timed. A few people said syllable, 1 or 2 people said syllable. People are asking what mora timing is. I will talk about that in a moment. You only need to be concerned about mora timing if you are a Japanese speaker. Don't worry. If you're not a Japanese speaker, then forget it. It's not important to you. No doubt, a lot of people here probably speak a syllable-timed language as their first language. Heard about syllable and stress, but what's mora? Don't worry, I'll talk about it. English is stress, Spanish is syllable, and Japanese is mora. Yes, Atsuko! Ah! Very smart. So, yes. As Atsuko said, syllable-timed languages are ones like Spanish, Italian, and French. Some stress-timed languages, English is there. Not Japanese, German, Russian, and European Portuguese. Brazilian Portuguese is a bit of a weird one because a while ago when I was learning Portuguese, I focused mostly on Brazilian Portuguese. And I was looking at the type of sentence stress it had, and it was supposedly like a mixture, depending on the accent in Brazilian Portuguese. But it's mostly considered syllable-timed, apparently, while European Portuguese is more stress-timed, which is super interesting from a linguistic perspective. I found that really interesting. And a mora-timed language is one like Japanese. So for people asking what a mora-timed language is, what mora timing is, it's essentially like, it's kind of hard to explain if you don't know Japanese. Japanese speakers will be like, yeah, got it, I understand. But the way that Japanese words are formed are not in syllables, they are formed in mora, which are, to put it in the simplest way for you, is essentially units of sound, like blocks of sound. Or sounds. So it could, for example, contain only a vowel sound, or it could contain a consonant and a vowel, and that is considered a mora. So an example I like to give is like how to say hello in Japanese. Yeah, we say like this. Okay, I don't have the right keyboard for it, so I'll write it in Romaji. But if anyone has a Japanese keyboard, please write konnichiwa in kana, please. In hiragana. So, yes, we've got konnichiwa. If I were to say konnichiwa with syllables, like English, Spanish, Italian, etc. have, it would be konnichiwa. It would have 4 syllables, right? Konnichiwa. However, when it comes to a mora-timed language, it would actually be konnichiwa. Thank you, Atsuko. Yeah. Konnichiwa. So it's more like units of speech, units of sound rather than speech, yeah? Units of sound, which usually are comprised of a vowel and a consonant and vowel. When it comes to Japanese, you also have the n sound. I don't have the symbol, but it is this one here. I'll just copy it from the chat. This one. So this is like the only consonant sound in Japanese where it is considered as a single mora. Yeah. Ko, ni, chi, wa. But in normal syllables, like English, let's say, konnichiwa. So it's completely different. If you don't speak Japanese, don't even worry about this. Only worry about it if you're a Japanese speaker, all right? Otherwise, you've got syllable time languages. So many of you are probably syllable timed language speakers. And this essentially means that you give each syllable the same amount of time when you say it. So I always describe this as kind of being like a machine gun. So when you speak, it's like da 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 da. Like every syllable has exactly the same amount of time. Yeah, syllable timed. Spanish, Italian, French, right? Like everything is da 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 da. While a stress time language like English works differently in the sense that you have your normal sentence, okay? And then you have certain words that are more prominent and they're given more time because you put stress on these words. So if you have a sentence, this word's important, this one isn't, this one isn't, this one is, okay? Then the two words which are not important are unstressed and they are said weaker and quicker, and quite often they are squished together, joined together, and they almost sound like one word. So let me know in the chat when you listen to particularly native speakers, okay? Let me know in the chat how tricky is it to understand them, or how easy is it for you to understand them? If we put it on a scale, if we say 1 is like, I don't understand anything that native speakers say, which no one should write a 1, because if you are watching this and you understand me and you can answer the question, then it can't be a 1. But if you say 10, like, yes, I understand native speakers completely, I understand them, no problems at all. But let's say let's put you at like a 5 or a 6. If you can understand certain strong, prominent words, but those little words in between, you really struggle with understanding, right? I'll give you a good situation that many of you might have been in. Imagine you're watching something on Netflix, right? Many of us probably have Netflix. So if you're watching something on Netflix, you think, I'm going to turn off the subtitles. I'm going to turn off the subtitles and listen and try and improve my listening, right? So you turn off the subtitles, but then you realize, holy crap, I don't understand anything. They're talking way too fast, which they probably aren't. They're probably talking normal speed. Like the way I'm talking now is normal speed. It's not fast. If I were talking like this, then it would be really fast. Yeah. But I'm actually talking a normal speed, yeah? And then you put the subtitles back on, and then you're like, oh, but hold on. I understand everything they said. With the subtitles, I understand every single word. So the problem is not the grammar. The problem isn't vocabulary. So what's the problem? This is the problem. This here. This is the problem. And it's because you've got those certain important words, and then those little words in between are all squished. Yeah, and they become really hard to understand sometimes, even for native speakers. True Italian sounds like a robot. Yeah, it can do. Sometimes it sounds a bit mean to say it sounds robotic, but syllable time languages often do sound quite robotic because it's like this da 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 da, like machine-like way of pronouncing the syllables or producing the syllables. Let's see. No, we aren't learning Japanese now. It's because people asked about Mora timing, and if you're on another tab, then that means you're not focusing on this stream. So you need to focus, and then you won't get confused. When people think English native speakers sound fast, they use connected speech. Exactly, but we don't. English, actually, you know what? Maybe I can show you. It'd be a bit of a pain to set up, but there is a chart where you can see a number of different languages and the speeds at which the languages are. So there are two ways of counting it in these charts. There is the number of syllables per second, and English falls very, very low down. Japanese and Spanish are right at the top. The fastest is Japanese, the second is Spanish, and then it goes down, 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 and then English is right at the bottom. I think English only just overtakes German, but not by much. And then you've also got the amount of information that's conveyed per, I can't remember if it's per syllable or per second, but English is quite high in that regard. So we speak slower, but actually per second we can transmit more information than other languages. It's so weird. It's much more difficult to understand American native speakers. I agree and disagree at the same time. I think it completely depends on the variants that you're used to. So for me, I understand American English absolutely fine, and it's absolutely nothing to do with me being native. It's simply just because I grew up with a lot of American TV, American children's cartoons, things like that. But let's say, for example, you asked me to listen to, I don't know, a very strong Southern Irish accent. I'm not as exposed to Southern Irish accents, so sometimes I find it a little bit trickier to follow. Like, for example, I'm from Yorkshire originally, and for me, of course, it's my accent. I understand people from Yorkshire absolutely fine, but when I was at university in Yorkshire, there were people, like other students studying with me, who really struggled with the Yorkshire accent, and they were native speakers from the south of England. So it's not necessarily because you're native or non-native, it's simply because you're not exposed to that accent enough. So I always encourage people, like, learn different accents, expose yourself as much as you can. If you can watch a movie without subtitles and you understand, then your language is perfect. I would say it's impressive. Yeah, it's definitely impressive. But then I try my favourite TV series. Yeah, I understand, Alberto. I'm the same. Like with Spanish, I listen to my boyfriend. I'm like, I understand every word. And then I'll put on like Casa de Papel and I'm like, what? They just don't articulate in that show. It's frustrating. Scottish accent sounds like a machine gun. Interesting observation. What accent do I have? My accent is a bit of a mix. I'm a bit of a mixed bag. But my so I focus mostly on teaching modern received pronunciation, but there are some parts of my accent which are definitely more northern. So for example, I don't say path, grass, bath. I say path, grass, bath. But pretty much everything else I say is modern RP. Though sometimes my Yorkshireness slips through. Yes. Very good. Okay, so people are quite confident with that. Let me show you an example of what I mean with sentence stress, with some actual real life examples. I'm going to move myself up here to give us some space, and then you can see the text. So if we just focus on the first section here, I'd like you to listen and repeat. All right, so make sure you're in an environment where you can listen and repeat. So we have drink water. Drink water. Now the second one. Listen to what I do. Drink some water. Drink some water. Drink some water. And then the last one. Drink some of the water. Drink some of the water. Drink some of the water. So, notice something. I am not clapping on every single word in the second and third sentences. Yeah? I clap on drink and water. Why is that? Because drink and water are important words. Okay? I'm going to talk more about which words are considered important and not important in a moment. But here, drink and water are important, right? Drink water. So we stress them. Drink some water. Now, if I spoke a syllable-timed language like Spanish, okay, let's imagine we are speaking English, but with like a Spanish kind of syllable-timed elements to it. Sentence 2 would sound like, drink some water, drink some water, drink some water. It's really strong, right? But because it's English, let me also just grab the comments here and move that across a little bit. There we are. So here, instead of saying some, which, can I make that a bit thicker? Ooh, nice. Okay. So, if it was strong, like drink some water, then I would use the sound. It would be strong. However, we are speaking English, yeah? And English is, as we know, a stress-timed language, okay? So, we're going to weaken this to a schwa. Drink some. Not some, with a schwa. Drink some water. Drink some water. Same here. I don't say, drink some of the water. Yeah? Drink some of the water. It sounds very, very robotic. And it's quite hard to say. It's quite like a workout on the mouth if you do it like that. So, notice what I do. Drink some of the water. Some. And remember, last lesson, we looked at connected speech in the previous workshop. If you haven't seen it, it's linked in the description. It is part 2, okay? We're going to take this we're going to move it over here to the start of the next word. It's a terrible arrow. Try again. So it's summer. So it sounds like the word summer, like, you know, spring, summer, autumn, winter, yeah? Summer. Here, we're going to remove this, all right? When it comes to some of the words that are not considered important, we can cut some of the sounds in them. Of, its strong form would be of. Okay, strong form. Don't worry if you're not familiar with strong and weak forms yet, because you will be by the end of today's workshop. You will know exactly what strong and weak forms are. Of is the strong form. Of is the weak form. And now you're thinking, but hold on, Emma, you said Yes, that's also another weak form. So this one here with some other, tends to come when the next word starts with a consonant sound. I'll put that like that. Yeah? It's usually when the next word starts with a consonant sound. So, some other. So, this sound here, of course, is a consonant sound. Yeah? Some other. We can cut it because of is not considered important. Some of the. Drink some of the water. So you can see how sentence stress, not word stress, how sentence stress works. Now, if you're thinking, which words do we stress and which ones don't we stress? I will show you now. I'm going to put myself down here. So, we can divide words in English into 2 categories, our content words and our function words. Our content words carry the meaning. So, going back up here, drink water, okay? If I say to you, drink water, you know I want you to drink water, right? No questions asked, nothing is ambiguous, you know what I want. But if I remove drink and water and I just say some of the, you'll be like, some of the what? Or let's imagine I remove some and I say drink of the water. Yeah, it's weird. It's not correct. It's a very weird sentence. but the key elements are there. Drink water. You know I want that to happen. The same if I remove the article or if I removed of. If I say drink some of the water, you'll be like, that's weird. Sounds weird. Not grammatically correct, but okay, I will drink water, right? You understand? So these little words here are not important. So they're always stressed, meaning no matter where they are in a sentence, no matter what context, they will always be stressed, and there will only be one form in the dictionary of them unless they have alternative pronunciations, but the stress doesn't change. And these tend to be verbs, adjectives, adverbs, nouns, negative modals, and negative auxiliary verbs, right? So they're all your really important content-carrying words. Your function words, on the other hand, are the ones that are not as important. So exactly what I explained here with some of the, some of the water. I can remove those words and nothing has changed, But if I remove water and I say, drink some of the, you'd be like, drink some of the what, Emma? Okay? Because it's important, right? It's an important word. With function words, we have strong and weak forms. So as I mentioned here with of, you've got the strong form here. Let me move myself again. So with of, strong form of here, right? Of is a weak form. Is a weak form. Sometimes words have more than one weak form, The, so we've got the, which is a strong form, But you've also got the, which is sometimes used, and then you've got the water, The water. Some, as I said, the strong form would be with this vowel, some, sa, some, and some. So this one, my jaw drops more, Some. Drink some. It's very fast and very weak. So two forms there, strong and weak. These tend to be pronouns, the verb to be. So even if the verb to be is used as like a main verb in a sentence, like they are happy, let's say, it would still be weak, like they are, instead of they are happy. They are happy. Prepositions, articles, connectives, modal verbs, and auxiliary verbs. So notice this is super important. You've got negative modal verbs, and then you've got modal verbs here. So modal verbs like normal modal verbs, that's a tongue twister. Normal modal verbs are considered just function words, so they tend to have a weak form as well as a strong one. But your negative modal verbs, for example, shouldn't, couldn't, don't, etc., they only have a strong form, all right? Negative auxiliary verbs as well, and auxiliary verbs, same rule applies, right? So your modal verbs and auxiliary verbs, so your auxiliary verbs in English are have, do, and be. Okay? So if these are used as an auxiliary verb, like, for example, I have been to Spain, I wouldn't say I have been to Spain. I would say I have been. I have been to Spain. I have been to Spain. So the been would be stressed because been is the verb, the main verb, the important bit. But the modal verb, the have, sorry, put that in the, sorry, the auxiliary verb, what am I talking about? The auxiliary verb have is not important, So that's that. Let's have a practice with a text together, unless anyone has any questions. So today we are going to have a look at another text. This one is The Goose and the Golden Egg. Let me talk about any questions firstly, though. It's like a cup of tea. Exactly, yeah. So we don't say a cup of tea. I'd like a cup of tea. You'd say, I like a cup of tea. And this is why it also gets shortened down to cuppa. So you'd say, like, can I have a cuppa? Do you want a cuppa? Some as well, yes. Why do you pronounce the ver in of? Drink some of the because you can pronounce it. So with some of the, you can say drink some of the water, or you can say drink some of the water. You can cut the "the" if you want. It's not important. We tend to cut it because, as I said, where was it? Yes. So with this one, the "of" is the strong form. "Of" is weak, but is also weak, but tends to come before a consonant sound. The is a consonant sound, yeah? So it's quite normal for us to cut the "the" and just say the, some of the, drink some of the water, yeah? Quite normal to do. Any other questions? Of is a function word. You transcribe of. It depends, Sonia. As I said, it has two ways to transcribe it. You can transcribe it as of, or you can transcribe it as a. Is when there's a consonant sound after it. There are two different ways to say it. Do you speak Spanish? Yes. Yes. Any other questions? Why can't I hear negative sound in fast speech? Then you probably just need to work on practicing more, because it's definitely there. Can and can't are hard to tell the difference when it's connected speech. I wouldn't say this is to do with connected speech, Andres. I would say that this is to do with stress and recognizing vowel length. So you've got can. If you pronounce can in a sentence in the strong form, let's say I can go, yeah? Maybe you mishear me and I say, no, I said I can go, then you know I'm saying can, yeah? I can't go. But if I were to say it just normally, okay, without the sentence stress, with the positive can, then it would be weak, right? It would be with a schwa. I would say, I can go. I can go. I can go. I can go. I can't go. So you notice here that when I just speak normally and I use can, it's very weak. You can actually hardly hear it because the focus is not on the kun. The focus is on the go, right? The focus is on the verb, not the modal verb. But on the negatives, we put the stress. So really listen for that. How can we cut off the consonants in fast speech? I talked about that in the previous workshop. Can you please go and watch that one? How do you read well, you would never say some of other water. You would never say that sentence, so don't worry about it. Don't worry about trying to say sentences that are not even grammatically correct and that you're never ever going to use in your life. You're never ever going to say that, so don't even worry about it. I can hear rather peculiar pronunciation of the oo in goose. Goose? Well, it's not goose. Goo. Ooh. Yeah? Ooh. Keep the tongue flat, yeah? Mouth round, tongue flat. Ooh. Goose. Goose and the golden egg. Yeah, with the f as well can be found in dictionaries. So with of, yeah, it can be found as like uth. But usually it's with the v, yeah? If it's the weak form, you might see it as like uth. Let me grab this one here. So going back to of, well, that's really big, never mind. I don't think you can see it. Yes, you can. So like with of, yeah. If you say, for example, of and off, this one tends to be off. Yeah, while this one will be of. These are the strong forms, yeah? Strong, right? These will be the strong ones. Of, yeah? This will be the weak of. Or This will be the weak of. Yeah, makes sense? So these two are two different ones. Yeah? Hopefully that makes sense. I don't want to dedicate a whole lesson to the word of. It's not that important. Don't worry about it. But yes. Which one to use in relation with the consonant in the next word? Which weak form to use? I'm not sure what you mean.
there should only be one weak form of words. As I said, if it's one like of, I don't know why everyone's so obsessed with this word of. It's not that important, don't worry about it. We just say of or And as I said, of is the weak form. Tends to be when the next word has a consonant sound. This one can be when there is a vowel or a consonant sound. Yeah? This would be for of. Yeah? Do not get too hung up on this. Like, the word of is not that important, right? You're focusing on the wrong things here. Focus on this as a whole, right? Don't focus on this as like one thing, just one word, okay? Sometimes we can become like too fixated on things that are not super significant when we should be looking at the thing as a whole. Don't worry about it. Can you explain why we silenced the H in he and his in the previous workshop? Because it's not important. You know, if we go back to this, pronouns are not important, right? So, because they're not important, we can cut some sounds. So, is usually one of the sounds that goes. If is at the start of a word, we'll cut it off. If it's in a weak word. So, for example, like he, him, her, his, etc. We can cut them. So he becomes e. Yeah. If I say, for example, he left early, I could say he left early. I went with him. I went with him. I went with her. I went with her. This is his. This is his. Yeah. So we can cut the H's in these ones. They're not important. Yeah. Same with hers as well. I miss hers. Yeah. This is hers. This is hers. You can cut it. Some accents tend to cut them a lot more than others, but it's quite normal in just normal speech to cut them. Them as well, yeah, we cut to with them. I was with them yesterday. So I was with them. Anyway, I'm going to leave questions until the end right now because I really want to focus on this text. So what I've done is I've highlighted the key words here. I'm just going to make my face a little bit bigger. And then you can see my face. Not that I'm super egotistic, but just so you can see for pronunciation. So we're just going to focus on this part here, okay? Any questions you have, I'll answer them at the end of the stream, but I really, really just want to get through this text. And we're just going to have a look at the first paragraph together, okay? So what I'm going to do is read through this natural speed. And what you can see is I very kindly highlighted where the stress would be. So all of these, there are a few missing. Give me a second. Oh, I just saw one. Yes, this one is stressed. The L as well. And I think that should be it. Yes. Okay, so I'll read through it. And then I'd like you to really listen to how I stress the words that are highlighted. Okay? Once upon a time, a farmer and his wife lived on a farm in the beautiful countryside. They owned a goose who laid a single golden egg every single day. The farmer took the egg every day to the market in town to sell. The money which they made from the egg supported them, and over time they were able to make a lot of money and become fairly rich. So you can see every time I landed on one of the highlighted bits of the word, my intonation went up and it was clearer, right? I pronounced that syllable a lot clearer and the word in general a lot clearer. Once upon a time. There you see? Once upon a time. A farmer and his wife. So you see with this one, we're cutting this one, yeah? Because his is a pronoun, we can cut the H at the beginning, yeah? This also happens, so I mentioned it with pronouns, but you can use it for relative pronouns as well. So ones like who, right? I could say, this is the man who did it, for example, yeah? If I say, this is the man who did it, as a relative pronoun, I can cut the H at the beginning here, And I can just say the man who, this is the man who did it. Yeah. If it's who as a question, who did it, for example. Now, who is important because it's our question word. Now it's a content word. Yeah. It's not a little grammatical word, because if I remove the who here and I just said, did it? You'd be like, what? Who did what? Who what? It makes no sense. But if I say, this is the man did it, it's wrong, right? It sounds weird, but you understand what I'm saying, okay? And that's because it's just not important. So here, once upon a time, a farmer and his wife lived on a farm. Lived on a farm. Farm in the beautiful countryside. Farm in the beautiful countryside. 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 In the beautiful countryside. Yeah? So notice the stress I'm using with countryside. They owned a goose. They owned a goose. A goose who laid a single egg. A single golden egg. A goose who laid a single golden egg. Laid a single golden egg. Laid a single golden egg. A single golden egg. No, a single golden egg. A single golden egg. Every single day. They owned a goose who laid a single golden egg every single day. Notice the stress? Yeah? A goose who laid, yeah? They owned, we're going to link that with the yeah. Talked about that yesterday. Yeah? They owned a goose who laid a single golden egg every single day. The farmer took the egg. The farmer took the egg. So here we're linking with a ra. Forgot to mention that. The farmer took the egg. Linking with a ya. The farmer took the egg. Took the egg. Not took the egg. Took the egg. Took the egg every day. Every day. Notice as well, I'm not saying every. Every day. Every day. Every day to the market. Not every day to the market. Da 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 da. Yeah, stress. Stress. Yeah. Every day to the market. Day to the market. Day to the market. Market in town. Not market in town. Market in town. Market in town. Town to sell. Town to sell. Not town to sell. Yeah? Every day to the market in town to sell. Not too strong. Every day to the market in town to sell. The money which they made. The money which they made. Made from the egg. Made from the egg. Linking here again with the ya. The money which they made from the egg. The egg supported them. The egg supported them. And over time. And over time. So not and over time. And over time. They were able. They were able. That's a very straight line. And they were able. And over time they were able. And over time they were able. Not and over time they were able. And over time they were able. They were able to make. They were able to make. Make a lot of money. Make a lot of money. So notice again, I'm not saying make a lot of money. Definitely not money. I hear money a lot, yeah? But money. Money. Yeah? With the dot at the top, yeah? Able to make a lot of money. Able to make a lot of money. And become fairly rich. And become. So with become, the stress goes on the second part. We don't say become and become fairly rich. No, but and become fairly rich. And over time, they were able to make a lot of money and become fairly rich. Once more, I'm going to read through it all, okay? Once upon a time, a farmer and his wife lived on a farm in the beautiful countryside. They owned a goose who laid a single golden egg every single day. The farmer took the egg every day to the market in town to sell. The money which they made from the egg supported them, and over time they were able to make a lot of money and become fairly rich. Yeah, so all of these I stressed. I think I still pronounce the H in who, but that's simply because I do that. So yeah, hopefully that is a lot clearer. So any questions? Any questions? English is not melodic. English has a very particular rhythm. I disagree. English definitely has a rhythm. Why do we stress lot? Because we have a particle. Yes. An article, sorry. Particle, I'm thinking Japanese. We have an article and then lot. Yeah. A lot of. It's important, right? It's important. More melody is needed. Yeah, you don't want to be like, once upon a time. You don't want to be like singing it. But yeah. So your intonation as well needs to go up on those stressed words, those stressed syllables. This is good stuff. Thanks, Alan. Happy New Year. So any questions? Any questions? We should kill the schwa sound because it's the only reason. I disagree. I 100% disagree. Because if you killed the schwa sound, then you would be making English so much more difficult for yourself. English is a very relaxed language. Yeah? That's like me saying about your language, oh, we should take away this vowel. No, why? Why are you trying to change it? This is good stuff, but by no means easy for foreigners. Yeah. This would be so much easier if it were taught from the beginning, but it's not. People focus on grammar and vocabulary. If you were taught this stuff from the very beginning, when you started learning English, it would make things so much easier, wouldn't it? Yeah, so lot of becomes loadser, but loadser is different. Yeah, so a lot of, you can say loads of, but loads of can also be said like loadser. Yeah, so it's a different word. Do we stress determiners? We can. I think usually they are. Usually they're stressed, their determiners. This cat. I'd like this cat, please. I'd like this cat. Yeah. Though we could also be unstressed, thinking about it. Depends how important it is. The yep before egg. Good advice. Yes. I talked about connected speech. Please explain the linking, yeah. I explained that in the workshop from yesterday, so please go and check that one out. Should we include WH questions in the list of stress words? Yes. Yes. Anything important that carries meaning goes in the stressed section. How to sound normal in sentence with a lot of stress words. Ooh, kind of hard to do. You're not going to get a sentence in English where nearly every single word is stressed. This one here is actually quite a tricky one for me to do as a native speaker of English because it's like stress. So my poor English brain is like, oh, thank God that there's a schwa and a schwa and a schwa and a schwa and a schwa. Yeah? So someone earlier was saying, we need to remove the schwa, right? No, because if we remove the schwa, it would be very, very difficult to pronounce. Laid a single golden egg every single day. It's really hard to say when it's all strong. It's really hard. This is why when you hear, for example, English people speaking Spanish, where every single vowel is strong, it's a lot of effort. When I speak Spanish, honestly, my mouth hurts. And I've been speaking it for nearly 10 years because I'm not used to this stress. stress foul. Yeah? I need to add like a schwa in there to give myself a break. Yeah? About the intonation. So in this case, just to keep the intonation explanation simple, every time a word is stressed, our intonation goes up. So once upon a time. So you see, I hummed that part, and every time it was a stress word, okay, I hummed it, and you can see that my intonation goes up every single time. And then at the end, to keep it simple, the intonation just goes down. Yeah, so it'll go to the market in town to sell. So it will go up and then it will glide down. Yeah, sell, day, countryside. Countryside's a bit different because you've got more syllables to play with. So kun will go up and then tree side will go down. Countryside. And then day, sell, rich. They will go down. Yeah, they'll like glide down. Support them. This goes down as well. Yeah, all are the same. You're loving the schwas. You've got to. Yeah, because they make it so much easier to pronounce English. Do you use weak forms in your daily life? 100%. Jesus, yes. If I spoke using only strong forms, I would sound like this. Okay, I'm going to read the same text, but only in the strong forms, right? Once upon a time, a farmer and his wife lived on a farm in the beautiful countryside. They owned a goose who laid a single golden egg every single day. The farmer took the egg every day to the market in town to sell. The money which they made from the egg supported them, and over time they were able to make a lot of money and become fairly rich. If I stressed every word, that's how it would sound. You see how it sounds very robotic? Yeah? Sounds very, very robotic. And that's because we need the stress there. Yes. It's a shortcut. It is. Yeah, it is Sonia. 100% agree. So the way you pronounce who is like pronouncing oo and not oo. It depends. You can cut it to like oo, or you can say like a goose who laid, or a goose who laid. It doesn't matter. You can say the goose who. It doesn't matter. Don't worry. Robot speaking. I feel like a Siri, like once upon a time, a farmer and his wife. Like, I am a robot. That's how I feel. But yeah, so that's that.